The morning my father died, I was standing in the service tunnel beneath a convention center holding a folder worth nearly $500 million when my phone vibrated with a message that made every number on the page suddenly meaningless. My brother wrote only 6 words: "Dad is gone. Come home now." And before I could even process them, my regional director appeared around the corner and told me that if I walked away from the merger presentation scheduled for that afternoon, the company would replace me before sunset. My name is Crown Morgan, and for 11 years I had built a career at Northbridge Capital by becoming the person executives called when a difficult deal needed rescuing, even though I had slowly learned that the people receiving the biggest bonuses rarely understood the human cost hidden inside their spreadsheets. My father had spent his life repairing railway equipment in a small industrial town, and whenever I told him about another company cutting hundreds of jobs to improve its quarterly results, he would shake his head and remind me, "A balance sheet can measure money, Claire, but it cannot measure what happens to a family when the paycheck disappears." The merger on my desk involved a struggling American rail equipment manufacturer and a private investment group from South Korea that planned to close 2 plants, replace experienced technicians with automated systems, and turn the company around within 18 months. And I had personally created the financial model predicting an extraordinary return for the investors. But while reviewing the final figures that morning, I discovered something nobody else had noticed. The projected savings depended on an unrealistic maintenance schedule and thousands of experienced workers being dismissed immediately, meaning the deal looked brilliant on paper only because someone had quietly decided that the people inside those factories were disposable. My director, Victor Hale, refused to delay the presentation even after I told him about my father, arguing that the investors had flown across the world and that grief could be dealt with after the contracts were signed. So instead of fighting him in the hallway, I returned to an empty maintenance office and opened a second version of the financial model I had secretly developed months earlier. I rebuilt the proposal around keeping the skilled workforce, upgrading selected machinery instead of replacing everything, and redirecting part of the acquisition budget toward employee retraining. And although the new plan produced a smaller first-year return, it created stronger long-term growth, lower operational risk, and something the original proposal completely ignored: stability. At 2, while Victor was preparing to present the approved plan in the company's executive suite, I entered the investors' virtual meeting from a quiet train station lounge, still wearing the black coat I had grabbed after hearing about my father, and told them that I was about to show them a version of the acquisition their own analysts had never been given. The lead investor, Daniel Park, interrupted me within minutes and demanded to know why I was challenging the strategy approved by my own company. And I answered honestly that I could either give him the model that made his investment look spectacular for 12 months, or the model that gave him a company capable of surviving 20 years. For nearly an hour, I walked the investors through every weakness in the original proposal, showing them how experienced technicians could prevent costly equipment failures, how retraining could preserve institutional knowledge, and how keeping the factories open would strengthen the company's reputation with regulators and customers who were already watching the acquisition closely. Then I told them my father had died that morning, explained that he had spent decades working beside people whose names never appeared in annual reports, and admitted that I could no longer build a successful deal by pretending those workers were merely expenses. And after a long silence, Daniel Park asked one question that changed my entire life. "If this were your company, would you still choose the cheaper plan?" I told him no, and instead of punishing me for the answer, he asked his advisors to recalculate the proposal using my version, eventually approving the revised acquisition with an expanded employee retention fund and a larger investment commitment, while Victor spent the next several hours discovering that the meeting he thought he controlled had become the most successful transaction in the firm's history. 3 days later, after my father's funeral, I returned to my apartment expecting a termination notice, only to find messages from the board, the investors, and even colleagues who had once ignored me. And the most important message came from Daniel Park, offering me a position leading the new company's transformation program, because, as he wrote, anyone can make a profitable spreadsheet, but very few people know when the numbers are hiding a human being. I still think about my father whenever I open a financial model, because losing him taught me that success means very little if you have to abandon everything you believe in to achieve it. And although I once thought my career had ended on the day I refused to present someone else's numbers, that painful decision became the moment I finally built a life that felt like my own. Please subscribe to our channel.